Hi, I'm about to demo a 10-loop double braid. That's my term for the braids that were traditionally made by two loop braiders standing side by side and cooperating in making a doubly wide, say for example a square braid would be, each braider would be making a square braid and connecting the two square braids. So the resulting braid would be a rectangular braid twice as big as a square braid. This is a continuation in a series, so to learn this braid you need to have first learned how to make 9-loop square braids. That will teach you how to use your thumbs in braiding, and my various methods of loop braiding with thumbs. And also you will need to have previously learned and practiced the double braid in the more reduced versions of 6 and 8 loops. So this is a continuation. It's not a beginning tutorial. And I won't do a lot of explaining in this. I'm just going to mostly demo, and I will try to make another video that will explain why this works, if it doesn't seem obvious that this side of the braid is making these loops are making a square braid, and these loops are making a square braid, and they are being joined together. I'll explain that elsewhere. It'll take too much time if I explain it here. Okay, let's get going. I'm using bicolor loops for this braid. You don't need to. The bicolor loops will make it easier, I think, clearer to see that which side of the loop is the upper side, particularly on the thumb. This is crucial because the thumb holds the loop in a different orientation than the fingers, so it's confusing at first to know which shank of the loop is the upper shank, and it is the one on this side. I have the black shanks are mounted so that they are in upper shank position on all the fingers, including the thumb. So on the thumb, the upper shank is the one that is nearest to the other hand. I call it kind of the inner shank, but it is the upper shank. It will go to the upper side, the upper layer of the braid, just as the upper shanks on the fingers go to and form the upper layer of the braid. So it's very important to know that's the upper shank. I'm going to start by braiding the divided form of the double braid, which can make a loop at the top of your braid. It will be two separate layers, a top layer of black and a bottom layer of blue, because that's how I've set it up. If I began with one of the loops turned the other way, you would have a top layer of mostly black with one blue little zigzag in it, and a bottom layer of mostly blue with one black zigzag. I want to make this very clear, so I'm starting with all the black shanks on the upper layer. The first move, I tend to, when my active hand, the hand that is doing the braiding, I tend to push the loops down to the knuckles so that the fingers are free. The A finger of the right hand, the index finger, will be the active finger. I will always be fetching the B loop, always. So first there will be an inner transfer. This will be forming the inner left side of the braid. Yep. I will fetch the B loop. It will go through the neighboring two loops. The second move, the new B loop, will go through these two loops. It will go the other way. Oops. Always in the double braid, the way I teach it, you will be fetching the B loop, the middle finger loop. Okay, so the first move is through two loops. I'm going to take the B loop without turning it. I do that the way I do that, and the way I recommend doing that, is by hooking onto the lower shank of the loop and pulling it through. At this point, this finger will just hold it while the left hand shifts the two lowest loops up one position, freeing the D finger to receive the transferring loop. The first transfer is done, the inner left transfer. Now the outer left transfer will be done. As with the 6 and 8 loop braids, I will be going from behind through two loops here now through 2 loops to take, as always, the B loop. It's without a turn. It's easiest to do this when the thumb is involved by turning the hand and you go straight through this thumb loop, down, let's see if that shows, down through the index loop. You'll see that I have the 2 lower shanks of the loop, since this is turned over, are on the same side of my finger. This is hard to teach. I see people do it wrong. I don't know how to do it wrong when I'm... Anyway, I'm going down through the thumb loop, and from behind, as it were, down through the index loop. Both uppers are on the same side of my active finger. Now I'm going to take the B loop. If you could see it from the front, it would be like this, by hooking the upper shank and bringing it through those 2. I usually do it with my hand turned. I think it's much more ergonomic. Let's see if this can show in the camera. Going through the first 2, and I look to scope out the upper shank of the B loop. I can't see it in the camera, but I look to see which one it is. It's the shank of the B loop that is closest to my eyes, really. And that's my aim. That's what I'm aiming for, and I pull it through the 2 loops in between the thumb and A finger loop. Pull it through and let go. And now I'm going to temporarily hold it while I shift those 2 loops down 1 position. The way you shift the thumb loop is crucial. You do not shift it you do not do what I'm doing now. You do not put the finger in the same way that the thumb is inserted. Instead, the finger dips down into the thumb loop. It's opposing the thumb in this loop. So you can see the thumb goes into the loop from a different direction than the finger does. This is crucial for keeping the upper shank of the loop where it belongs. And it's also, I think, more ergonomic. So you learn this in my 9-loop square braid video, but that way you'll be shifting up. Here you're shifting down, but it's essentially the same movement, it's just reversed. And it's very good to first practice going back and forth, because this is going to be a move you need to do correctly in the braid. So I shifted those 2 loops down, and now I will place the transferring loop onto the thumb, straight on, like that. The blue shank is the lower shank in this braid. It looks upper here. That's an illusion. I'm putting it on. This is the upper shank. It came through with no turn. We'll see that again, and this is important to learn before you move on to making this braid with turns, before you move on to making it the solid rectangle braid. Other hand, the right transfers now. Through 2 loops. Oh, I'm doing it wrong. Use the index finger. Through 2 loops. I'm now hooking the lower shank of the B loop and pulling it through. Temporary hold, shift, shift, place. The loop did not turn over. Black shank is uppermost. The outer, that was the inner right transfer. Now comes the outer right transfer. Through these 2 loops to get the B loop. It's easiest to do it if I turn my hand. Of course, that doesn't make it easy to show. Usually I turn my hand completely over. I'm going to tip it slightly so it shows better in the camera. I'm doing this as I look through the camera lens rather than at my hand, so it's a little... Then I scope out that shank, the one closest to me on the B finger. That's the one I want to get. I go into it, oh, I forgot to mention this before, I go into it from behind because I'm going to take it without a turn. Later, with a turned transfer, you will be going into it a different way. So it's really crucial to do it this way and to know that later it'll be different. I'm pulling it through, and it will come through with no turn, essentially, because of the way I put it on the thumb. It looks as if it turned. The blue shank is up now, but that's just an artifact of how I am temporarily holding it. Now I shift down, and again I'm putting the first finger down into the thumb loop. it's not going in the same way the thumb goes into the loop. It's going in the opposite direction, which will transfer shift the loop the correct way so that the black shank, the upper shank, is still upper. Now I place the temporarily held loop onto the thumb. It looks as if it's backwards. It looks as if the upper shank is blue, which it shouldn't be, but no. This is the upper shank. It's black. It's as it should be. Now, both the left and right transfers of each hand, of each square braid, have been done. Nothing has been tightened yet. That'll happen after the two halves of the braid are connected. To connect the two halves of the braid, this is the square braid that if two people were making this braid, the square braid the right braider would be holding. This is the square braid the left braider would be holding. Now they would take their adjoining, it would be their index finger loops, their neighboring loops, and they would exchange them one through the other. I will do it always. Right loop onto left finger, left loop over right loop. You want to make it consistent. And it can make a difference with some of the braids, which way you do it. I do it consistently this way unless there's a reason not to. Now is when you tighten, and amazingly, this tightening move will tighten, eventually in the braid it will tighten all the transfers that you just made, all four of them. So it actually needs to be a little firmer of a tightening than you might do for, I find, than you might do for a square braid. You're tightening four transfers, four crossings. And you do it the same way. I'm going to have to stand up by stretching the loops all the way out to the side, gently. The first, when I'm tightening against the knot, at the very beginning, I might tighten a little harder and make sure I've gotten it worked back. That was the first cycle of moves. I will now do the second cycle, and I usually count the cycles when I'm braiding. Here it isn't so necessary because I'm just going to braid a certain distance divided to make a loop. But sometimes it's very important to count the cycles, and I would now start saying 2. Instead, I'm just going to describe what I'm doing. So beginning the left inner transfer through 2, take the B loop with no turn, unreversed, straight, open, different terms for this. Now shift up and place. So it was temporarily held and now placed. Outer left transfer, the tricky one. It becomes very natural. It's only tricky in the beginning. So normally I would turn my hand, but I'm seeing that it won't show in the camera very well if I do that, if I turn it. So I go down through the thumb loop, from behind, the same way the index finger is inserted, from behind through that loop, and I'm going to fetch the closest shank, which is the upper shank, fetch that through. This is how I do it. This is how the transfer with no turn is done. This loop will not get a turn, even though it looks like it does. Through, now shift, and then shift the thumb loop by going down into it. It sort of flips over. Place. Upper shank should be here. No turn in the loop. The upper shank goes straight to the upper surface of the braid, which doesn't really show yet, but this is how you check it to make sure you look to make sure it didn't get a turn. Right transfers. So inner. I always do the inner transfers first. Inner transfer is through 2 loops. Take the B finger loop without a turn. It comes through, temporary hold, shift, shift, and place. Now the outer right transfer. Down through the thumb loop, from behind through the index loop. I usually have turned the hand at that point, and I'm scoping out, looking for, eyeing. I look down there and I see the closest shank of the B finger loop. Pull it through, shift, shift, and place straight onto the thumb. Upper shank is here. I'm ready to do the loop exchange, which is the connecting move. Placing right onto left, lifting left over right. Tighten. A couple times at least. Nice and smooth with no jerking. Third cycle. Through 2. This is a very balanced twill braid because the taken loop, the transferring loop, goes through 2 loops on both sides. It's a 2-2 twill. There are some irregularities in the crossing that happen with the exchange, but basically it goes through 2 loops on each side, whereas the 8-loop braid went through 2 in the inner transfers and only through 1 on the outer. So it's a less balanced structure. Sorry. Back on track. Through 2. Take the B loop. Shift, shift, place. Outer transfer through 2. Take the B loop. Shift, shift, place. Check to make sure the upper shank is where it belongs. Nothing is getting turned. This will make a divided braid. Right transfers, inner transfer through 2. Take the B loop, shift, shift, place. Outer transfer, tip, through 2. Take the B loop, upper shank, and I'm taking it from behind it. This will make it not turn over. If I were turning it, in a certain direction, I would take it the other way. We aren't doing that. It's very important to take it by going from behind into the loop the same way its finger is inserted. Taking it through, shift, shift, place. Upper shank is still upper. Exchange move. Right onto left, left over. Actually not over, but around. Left around right. What's important about that, I guess it's kind of inevitable, but it must go around. One loop is coming through the other loop. That's very important, not to have one loop go over the other loop. One loop goes through the other loop with no turn. Tighten. Next cycle of moves. Through 2. Take the B loop, shift, shift, and place. Outer transfer through 2. Take the B loop, shift, shift, and place. Right transfers, inner transfer through 2. Take the B loop, shift, shift, place. Through 2. Take the B loop. Always for this divided braid, taking it from behind it. Shift, shift, place. Exchange, right onto left, left around right. Tighten. Next cycle, through 2. Take the B loop with no turn. Shift, shift, place. Outer transfer through 2. Take the B loop from behind, not from in front, from behind. Shift, shift, place. Right transfers through 2. Take the B loop, shift, shift, place. Outer transfer through 2. Take the B loop, shift, shift, place. Exchange move. Right onto left, left around right. Tighten. For tightening the thumb should never dip down. You will lose that loop and you will not be able to see which is the upper and the lower. It'll get very confusing. It's always hitchhiking position. Your own hands determine kind of how you hold it, but it just, sometimes people seem to think they need to tuck down, and then they will lose their thumb loop, and also they won't, just always try and keep it pointing up, 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 whether it leans forward or not, whether it has a curve in it like mine or not. When you tighten, as the hands approach, the thumb and the fingers are sort of basically on one plane, but as you tighten and spread out, this is hard to show in the camera actually, the thumb does not stay with the fingers at all. It's like a post. The fingers swivel around it, sort of in a C shape, so that the loops stay relatively taut, so different ones don't sag. So that the thumb is kind of independent, which it is. It functions. It opposes the fingers. It doesn't follow them, and the fingers swivel around the thumb. Let's see if you can see that as I tighten. They swivel. Like right now, they're as they come towards each other, the hand is kind of flat, but as I bring them out to tighten, which doesn't show well on the camera, sorry, I'm tipping my loops. As I bring it out, the hand forms sort of a C shape, and so that the thumb, anyway, so that the loops can stay tight. And the wrist is in neutral position. You don't need to contort your wrist. I'm going to turn the camera. It's a bit difficult. Let's see. Well, I don't know if I can show it with this view, but the wrist does not need to contort. The fingers swivel around. If I do it this way, the fingers swivel around the thumb. Okay, well, I think I might show it a little more clearly in the 9-loop square braid video. Okay, let's see if I did. Oh, when you stop and you don't know where you are, what I want to check is if I did the loop exchange move, and you just look down and see if the two loops on the D finger and the little fingers cross each other, and they do. That means I exchanged them. If I hadn't exchanged them, let's de-exchange them. If I hadn't exchanged them, they wouldn't cross each other at the base of the braid. They're now coming from the outside. Each one is coming from the outside of the braid. So you can see check if you've done that move yet. There you go. Okay, next cycle. Try and not explain so much. Through 2. Take with no turn. Shift, place. Outer transfer through 2. Hook the loop from behind so as not to turn it when it goes onto the thumb. Shift, shift, place. Right transfers. Inner transfer first. Through 2. Shift, shift, place. Outer transfer through 2. Shift, shift, place. Exchange. Tighten. Through 2. Shift, shift, place. Outer transfer through 2. Shift, shift, place. Through 2. Shift, shift, place. Through 2. It's easier if you tip. Shift, shift, place. Exchange. Tighten. Through 2. Shift, shift, place. I'm going to speed up a little bit. I want to get to Okay, this is upsetting because I see that I'm out of time. I don't quite understand. I'm going to be out of time very soon. I have no idea I'd taken this long. Let's see. I want to get a certain distance of divided braid and then show you which maybe I have. Okay, I'm going to quickly, this is how I park the loops. I meet each finger, so that's how I will then pick them up. I had made this loop bundle far too long, that's why for demoing, so I had to shorten it a bit here with a knot. So there's the divided section for my loop. And now I'm going to demonstrate rather quickly in this video, because I don't have much time left, making the transfers all with a turn, which will be a solid, what I call a solid rectangle form of the braid. This will join up the braid. So I'm going to take, and I'm going to turn from above, which won't look like from above here. The turns will mirror each other on the inner and outer transfers. So inner transfer with a turn through 2, over, taking the upper shank of the loop, shift, shift, place. It has now turned blue on that finger. Now I'm going to go through these 2 on the outer transfer, but I will not go in from behind. I'll go through these 2 and I will pick up from in front. I will pick up the upper shank of the loop. So I went into it from in front, opposite to how the B finger is inserted in the loop. Other than that, it's the same. Shift, shift, and place. But now the blue shank is up and it turned in a counterclockwise direction, whereas the first turn was in a clockwise direction. The turns, when you do a square braid, counter each other in direction. More about that later. Here's how it looks on the right hand. Through 2, take from above, shift, shift, place. Through 2, insert finger in the opposite direction you did before. Shift, shift, place. The blue shank is up. Exchange and tighten. Once I do that a few more times, all the blue shanks will be up through 2 with a turn, shift, shift, place. Now 2 of these 2 shanks loops have turned over and the blue is up. Through 2, I can pull these forward, and I lift up, putting my finger in from the front, the opposite direction of the B finger. Shift, shift, place. Through 2, take with a turn, shift, shift, place. Through 2, shift, place, and exchange. I'm about out of time, so this will have to be continued. Thanks for watching.